And he was needed until 1919. Remember, he's only supposed to be there for 3 months, and he's there until 19. It was this time that the King of England received him and gave him this high honor. And by May 1919, Dr. and Mrs. Kazanjian were back in Boston. Now, in the fall of 1919, he was 40 years of age. He matriculated in Harvard Medical School. Now, without the MD degree, he could hardly perform the same things he was doing in the battlefields of France. He was very quiet. His wife, Sophie, had died in 1919, leaving him with a daughter. He had a thriving practice and was a teacher as well. It was an arduous, fatiguing, and demanding undertaking, which he did. Characteristically, he never volunteered information about himself, and apparently was never asked. His position was very dramatically changed in a very unusual instance. Now imagine that the medical students are sitting in an amphitheater, and they're listening to a lecture by all means given by 2 British surgeons who are lecturing to this class. All of a sudden, one of the British doctors grabs the arm of the other and points up, and they run up to the amphitheater, and they see Kazanjian there, and they grab him, and they bring him down, and they say, "What are you doing up there? You're the one that taught us this technique that we're lecturing on." So his whole world changed after he became a hero, but this was the story of his life. One day he would not be a hero, the next day he would be up there. Well, anyway, and this changed his whole life. He was on the staff of most all of the hospitals in the Boston area, including the Massachusetts General Hospital, where he became chief of plastic surgery, the Massachusetts Eye and Ear Infirmary, where he was the first chief of plastic surgery, and the Mount Auburn Hospital, where he and Dr. Cannon established a crippled children's clinic. That little Armenian, a number of surgeons remarked to another doctor, Dr. John Converse, who was his protege, is really very clever. Converse attributed this patronizing mindset to, quote, the parochial attitude by New Englanders at this time toward foreigners, end of quote. Now, another very famous contemporary doctor, Dr. Robert Goldwyn, a very distinguished plastic surgeon, felt that Kazanjian was an outsider, one who by no means was preoccupied with power. He was all substance and no image. Puffery was not part of his person, end of quote. His humility was such that hospital personnel who worked around him were really unaware of his eminence. And many of the techniques that he introduced were our standard procedures today that we all. He operated without any wasted moments, very decisive, fast. He was ambidextrous, but he didn't do facelifts. He thought we should grow old gracefully. And there were a lot of, and I don't want to go into the techniques, but he made many inventions that I don't want to go into. And he, again, went back to the Harvard Dental School, as he had done before the war. And he had a clinic there, and he gave lectures on fractures. And his students thought the world of him. One student whom I interviewed, that he was a gift of God. Literally, was a gift of God. And he began a surgical practice in Boston, which drew patients from all over the world. And he even treated Sigmund Freud in Vienna. And one journalist named him the father of modern plastic surgery, another one the world's most famous plastic surgeon. He had captured the interest of the world. And his practice would continue until he was 86. He was first named professor of clinical oral surgery at Harvard in 1922, and he continued in this category until 1941 when he was appointed the first professor of plastic surgery in the history of Harvard University. And he also taught at the University of Pennsylvania Medical School. Humility with dignity, that rare blend which often accompanies genius, were his most notable traits. He was quiet and unassuming. His bearing was shy and approached the apologetic. He was never known to negate a colleague's work. His kindness, warmth, and modesty are legendary. And his honors are too much to mention tonight. I could just say that he received an honorary Doctor of Science from Bowdoin College, and there's a visiting professorships have been named for him at New York University and Massachusetts General Hospital, where in addition a Kazanjian fellowship exists. The Massachusetts Eye and Ear Infirmary named a teaching room for him. He wrote at least maybe 80 or 100 professional articles, and in collaboration with his colleague and former student Dr. John Converse, he wrote in 1945 the classic plastic history textbook, The Surgical Treatment of Facial Injuries, which appeared in three editions. On a human level, when I was writing this book, I got an email from Australia, and unbelievable. It seems that some word got around that I was writing this book about Kazanjian. And a lady, a speech therapist, wrote to me that her grandfather, 90 years early, had been treated by Kazanjian. And she was just overjoyed that someone is writing his story. She said, I wouldn't be alive if it weren't for Dr. Kazanjian. And she told me that her grandmother had been told by a mystic that she would marry a man with a map of a river in Australia, and that was the wounds that Kazanjian had healed on his face. And she was just ecstatic.